This game isn't normally considered to be an official release, but how could I let it pass? All Night Nippon Super Mario Bros. Is one of the more well-known Famicom Disk System exclusives. Skipping the history just so I can explain what's on screen, it is basically the halfway point between Super Mario Bros. And Super Mario Bros. 2. It has updated Super Mario Bros. 2 graphics, plus a few other graphics that have changed, some revised levels that make them a bit more difficult, a few stages pulled in from Super Mario Bros. 2, and a secret Worlds A through D that you have to get to by beating the game 8 times. The 2-player mode is gone. Now you have your selection between Mario and Luigi, just like Super Mario Bros. 2. And they've put in a proper continue screen rather than requiring that you use a code. So where did this thing come from? Why did Nintendo make Super Mario Bros. 1.5? All Night Nippon was the late-night broadcasting block for Nippon Broadcasting, a nationwide radio service. The times it broadcast varied, but in the mid-80s it would air from about 10 p.m. to 5 a.m. Since the program was broadcast 7 nights a week, it had a different host every night. Most of these hosts were well-known comedians, and the show would have various segments that leaned into their abilities. In 1985, they added a dedicated segment for the Famicom. It would introduce games and give strategy tips, and sometimes there'd be a little competition between the host and a guest. Yes, they were playing the video games on the radio. This led to the All Night Nippon production staff creating a strategy guide videotape for Super Mario Bros. Also included on that tape was a novelty song that finally gave the Super Mario Bros. Theme some official lyrics. This cooperation led to a contest, or what was intended to be a contest, where the prize was a special version of Super Mario Bros. Themed around All Night Nippon. On December 15th, All Night Nippon announced the giveaway. Send in a postcard, and you could win one of 2,000 copies of All Night Nippon Super Mario Bros. The next night, they announced that the response was so overwhelming that they were going to sell copies. And starting on December 20th, which was also the deadline for the drawing, you could buy a copy at Nippon Broadcasting Music Center. How many copies were sold that way is a little bit unclear, because while we know that there were 3,000 copies initially sold over the counter like that, they also did 2 more runs of the disc. So there's probably around 15,000 copies in existence, give or take a few. But the limited availability as a giveaway and a specialty souvenir item available from exactly one shop has made All Night Nippon Super Mario Bros. Into one of the most collectible Famicom Disk System games. It's also one of the most often counterfeited Famicom Disk System games. In fact, it's counterfeited so often, you can generally assume that any copy you can find is not real. Most Japanese fans don't consider it part of the Famicom Disk System set, so I'm counting it as separate, but you can see it's a real edge case. I did a very quick rundown of the differences already, but what makes this All Night Nippon Super Mario Bros. Instead of just a regular Super Mario Bros.? First, you'll notice that some enemies have been replaced. The Goombas and the plants have been replaced with Sunplaza Nakano, the Friday host of All Night Nippon. Those enemies are called Okapie, after his catchphrase at the time. The reason he's an enemy is that he was tricked by Bowser into getting all of the rest of the hosts captured, and was then copied as all of the monsters. The invincibility stars have been replaced by hexagrams. This is a reference to another Nippon Broadcasting show. And you'll note that the flags on castles, and the axe behind Bowser at the end of every world, have been replaced by the Fuji Broadcasting symbol. Fuji Broadcasting owned Nippon Broadcasting. The other thing is that instead of a toad at the end of every world, you'll find one of the hosts. The most famous of these is at the end of World 5, where you rescue Thursday's host, Beat Takeshi. Takeshi's own game, Takeshi no Chosenjo, was released on December 10th of that year, and this probably would have been a better video game debut for him. I don't really feel a need to dig too deep into All Night Nippon Super Mario Bros., because I've essentially already talked about the same game twice in this series. However, this is a better Super Mario Bros. 2 than the actual Super Mario Bros. 2. It is just remixed stages, but they're remixed in a way that is more difficult but still enjoyable. They'll throw you off if you know every level of Super Mario Bros. By heart, but not in a way that's unfair or unpleasant. Out of all the weird modifications of Super Mario Bros. That are available on the Famicom Disk System, this is the one to play.